My name is Boyan. I'm the co-founder and chief executive officer at StorPool Storage, and we're solving really difficult storage problems 1 petabyte at a time. Before we dive in, I would like to take just a couple of minutes to set the stage and take you on a trip through history. And that's the history of data storage industry. Started with some mainframes in about the 60s, and then it continued with the client server architecture with local storage in the 1980s. And here we see a VAX server on the left side. On top of it, you have a single disk drive. And on the right side, you can notice the printer. And that thing is not a fridge underneath it. That whole thing is the printer, right? We moved on with a dual controller, shared disk array architecture in the 1990s. And the same train of thought and the same thinking behind it was later implemented in a shared disk storage software, which is a scale-up architecture, 200,000 a year or so. Now, after people fighting with the scale-up architecture, they came up with software-defined storage, which was trying to do a scale-out software-based reimplementation, again, of the same train of thought, the same school of thought. And these type of technologies were built for a different environment. They still work, but they work better for simple and more predictable environments. Small 1-3 rack deployments with 50 servers, give or take, sometimes more, sometimes less, but they have some challenges. But the business of today needs something completely different. The business of today is not an enterprise that's running 9 to 5. It has to have dynamic provisioning. It has to have self-service. It runs workloads, thousands of workloads in parallel. It's always on, 24/7. It needs to have 5 nines of uptime with the maintenance included, because as we said, it's always on, right? It needs consistent low latency for its applications and thousands of users. And then it needs linear scalability, both in terms of performance and capacity. And to achieve that, you have to have an architecture that doesn't have a single point of failure. Now, in current business, when any company is an IT company, like a bank, like they are reducing their branch network, they're doing online applications, right? They have a scale. And that scale is like, let's define it as, let's say 5,000 VMs and a petabyte of block storage data. We're talking about block here, and some other metrics like 200 compute servers or 10 racks or thereabout, just to give some shape and form to that scale. Then a large scale would be arbitrary 20 times or more, like hundreds of thousands of VMs, 20 petabytes of storage, thousands of compute servers. And using the old approach with the business requirements of today is a road to ruin. That's so in many ways. One, you have typically little or no automation. It's ticket-based systems. People are unhappy, both users, because it's so frustrating, takes so much time to provision resources, but also the IT guys that have to set up things by hand and to do maintenance windows at Saturday or 2 a.m. on Sunday. So what we see is IT gets in the way of the business in today's environments. And that means that the company is losing competitiveness. It's slow to address a very dynamic and challenging market, and it's failing to address the needs of that market. And that all leads to a company that's using storage technologies developed in the 60s as an origin, and that's caused them profit margins, and that's due to organizational process and technical debt of using something that was built for a different era. And we were thinking with starting StorPool that the old approach is working, but we need a radical departure from that line of thought. Stepping in, StorPool is a company that we started some 11 years ago. So it's latest generation storage technology designed from the ground up, but it's also very proven with hundreds of flash deployments around the world. We operate in more than 30 countries around the world. And unlike pretty much any other scale-up storage company, we're profitable and a growing company. To achieve that, we kind of focused on specific segments of the market, where we think the ball is going. And in the old days, money was spent by the enterprise and Fortune 1000 companies or Global 2000 companies. But today, these companies are acting and operating as a service provider. And money is shifting to the service provider. And the technology that goes along with it should be reinvented and redeveloped. As you can see, most of our customers are service providers in some form or shape. And they're running mission-critical applications and workloads for very well-known companies at scale. So these companies, what they need is a system that's having dynamic provisioning, self-service, it's parallel workloads, processing parallel workloads for thousands of applications. It's always on, it's very reliable, has zero downtime, and it has very low latency. And we'll talk about why that is important in the subsequent session. It's scalable, and it doesn't have a single point of failure. As a concept, you might be thinking, okay, how did these guys that we've never heard of or are not well known build this? And one of the reasons is we're coming from an unlikely region. We started in Europe, more specifically Eastern Europe, Sofia, Bulgaria. And little did people know, but that was the Silicon Valley of the ex-Soviet bloc. This is what you see on the picture here is a LAMP computer built in Bulgaria in the 60s. Meaning we have tremendous knowledge in and pedigree in engineering and deep tech things. We also, as a team, come from two very different domains compared to the storage industry in general. We're coming from a service provider background, and we're coming from high performance networking. So in a way, we're coming with a thinking that's out of the storage box, pun intended. And that allowed us to design a system that's very well suited to the businesses of today and tomorrow, but design it 10 years back. And also, because storage is becoming an integral part of any cloud solution today, you cannot think in siloed ways about this is my storage, this is my computer, and this is my network. Now they're one integral whole piece of infrastructure. Second thing that's very important is that, or third thing is that our team was built with very little funding, or kind of we were doing that in a very efficient manner that is not possible. It is not possible to redesign the entire storage architecture with a VC-funded business because they're looking at 12 to 18 months run rate, and they're very short-sighted. You know, that's because of the entire way you build a business. StorPool is a very different company, as I mentioned, profitable, and it's kind of a self-sustained entity. We own the company, so we have a very long-term vision about what would be the best solution on the market going forward, and we were able to actually pull it off and build one. The StorPool Storage platform consists of the storage software that is running a data platform that can do multiple tiers of storage with a lot of added software suites that augment the software platform. The first one is the metrics and analytics, and we'll dive in all of these pieces in the technical session, okay? We have alerts and reporting. It is a state-of-the-art system that's capturing, processing, visualizing millions of metrics per second. We have a separate suite that is part of the StorPool solution that enables backup in disaster recovery in a primary data platform, right? Block storage platform. And then we have a number of integrations because the modern enterprise is API driven. So we have integration with leading or the usual cloud management platforms like VMware, OpenStack, Kubernetes, CloudStack, so on. Looking at the StorPool layer in, still high level, but a layer in about the storage platform, it's software only, it's hardware agnostic. It can run any standard commodity hardware without the need of specialized hardware or specialized components. But unlike previous generation of storage technology, is a parallel multi-node shared architecture, shared nothing architecture. It has linear scalability in both performance and capacity, and it's always on. You can have maintenance and upgrades, hardware lifecycle changes of storage devices, of servers, with the workload and Oracle SAP databases running on top. And it's block first, although we do have some file, we'll talk about that. And it's designed for large-scale modern IT infrastructure companies, which could be any enterprise, as we mentioned today. On top of that, it has a fully managed service wrapping, and we'll touch about this, why it's so valuable for the enterprise of today and tomorrow. So a question that you might be having in the back of your head is, what about hardware? Because a solution is always software and hardware. And IT teams usually have a history with somebody. They know where to buy hardware from, right? They have established relationship, data center providers, they have good relationships with distributors and resellers. So hardware is the easier bit. It's the software that takes otherwise lifeless hardware and makes it come alive. So in a nutshell, you can think of it as StorPool provides storage as a service product on a bring your own server terms or bring your own device terms. And that technology is great, but that technology should make business and commercial sense. And to just give a glimpse in what that technology means for the user of that technology, we did this TCO calculator, or return on investment, the inverse of the total cost of ownership calculation, at a case that starts at 100 terabytes of stored flash data, and over the course of 5 years goes to about a petabyte. Here you can see you have scope 1, what's referred to as scope 1, directly attributable cost to the storage system, which is colocation, cooling, electricity, hardware. But more notably, something that gets overlooked is people and software that makes the hardware run well.
Just a question on the managed service. Is that a cloud offering? Is it like a control plane for storage pool available in the cloud, or is that something like a managed service provider would deploy on his own infrastructure to control the storage pool instances for his multiple tenants and that sort of thing?
It's a solution that you deploy on-premise, but our team can augment the internal IT team of the company to offload the storage and to some extent networking and server-related and software-related tasks. So your core IT staff can focus on the application or the core business workloads that the company has, which is where the value creation goes. So it's an on-premise thing. And we'll talk about that in the second session. We'll have a deep dive into that.
Okay.
And you've got the second question?
No, that was my main question.
Okay.
Thanks, Boyan.
Going back to the TCO calculation, so we have a scope 1 thing, factors that are directly attributed to the storage, usually when you purchase it. But then many people don't attribute the costs that go for running the storage system. That's planned maintenance, expansions, drive replacement, upgrades of the controllers. But more notably, the end of life cycle that is rather costly. And Alex, my colleague, will have a kind of some stats about that as surveys, studies that have been done to quantify that. And also the storage management overhead of rebalancing systems and so on and so forth. And the third one is things that a good storage system can improve on a business level to improve the profit margins of the entire business. These are things like software licenses for your database provider. That could be all the compute servers that we can increase the utilization of. That could be the infrastructure management overhead, or improving a costly and complicated old school data center design. And to measure that, we've done this TCO calculation starting at scope 1. And in this case, you see that a shared storage system developed by StorPool, which is a parallel shared nothing architecture, compared to the old traditional or legacy, should I say, dual controller, shared disk array, all flash array typically, solution is 52% less expensive. If you add the scope 2, which is things that are maintenance around your storage appliance, that would be about 59% case. on a 100 terabyte system, as I mentioned, with growing to a petabyte over 5 years, and including all the scope 3 things that we can improve in the business, that's 60% less expensive. What we haven't told you, that we were making that calculation based on the list price of a typical flash array that is already discounted with 80%, because that is the old storage mindset in the old storage game. You get a very high list price, vendors would discount it to 80%, right? Or 60, 50, 70. We took the extreme example of 80% discount, and all the numbers that you see, StorPool is 60% less expensive than a traditional solution that's already discounted with 80%. Crazy, right? All of this thing comes to one thing is like the takeaway. The old things that we've developed, the old storage architecture and paradigm, they're working great. They still work in some cases. But if we are looking forward at where business is going, what human activity requires, we need to adopt a new way of thinking about storage.
So right now, the organic growth model that you're going with, where you're not taking VC money or whatever, that's that's all great. What do you see as success for StorPool over, say, the next 4 or 5 years from a number of customers that you're looking to acquire over that time, right? I'm just curious to see what your overall strategy is for getting critical mass of your technology out there. And I don't know what your plans are for the company as far as, what does success look like in 4 or 5 years?
Sure. The short answer is we think about StorPool as the new storage company, a storage company that saves the world's data and makes any human activity faster through a faster storage. Because data storage is the lifeblood, or data is the lifeblood of any human activity today. To take down that to a practical level, many of our customers are service providers that aggregate the demand and workloads of hundreds, thousands, and sometimes tens of thousands of customers and end customers. So from that point of view, we don't need to have 10,000 enterprise customers. We can have 1,000 service provider, cloud service provider, MSP customers, SaaS, infrastructure as a service, or ISV customers. That would be actually, these 1,000 customers would be serving maybe an order of magnitude more, or 2 orders of magnitude more end users. So this is how we think about it. So the answer to your question is more than 1,000 large-scale users of the StorPool data platform.
Sounds a lot like a company I know somebody else used to work for, and it kind of worked. Maybe you could give some experience on that one, Andy.
Boyan, as far as the primary storage block protocol is concerned, there's Fiber Channel, there's iSCSI, there's a couple of different ways of doing that. Mm-hmm. Which way are you supporting?
I'll do a very brief answer to that, because Boyan K will do a very deep dive into that. But the short answer is we have our own block device driver if you're running hyperconverged or in the KVM stack. You also have iSCSI, and then we have NVMe TCP.
Oh, NVMe, okay. All right.
Boyan, I had one question. You couple of times mentioned that your company is profitable. For a storage company to reach that stage is very tough. So what are the key elements that you thought of or were focusing on when building this company that led to the profitability? Because we have seen like storage startups starting and doing work and selling products and then going out of business, which leads customer in a very difficult situation. So from that perspective.
Right. I think I touched a bit on that in the presentation earlier, but a couple of very key differences is we're building a company that is designed to solve real pain points for real customers. That means we're not a company that's trying to do a market grab leverage through venture funding. In other words, we're looking at how can our customers can run their business that is becoming so good that they want to pay a fair price for that product. And we're not looking for shortcuts, which we refer to as marketing-defined storage, which is take a funding of $30 million, let's say, build some slideware, because you cannot build a product in 12 months, that type of product, and start advertising it, getting some customers, but the product works, but doesn't really work. And then at some point, something breaks because you cannot make another funding round. The longish answer is a lot of hard work, sleepless nights over the last 10 years. It's a completely different mindset about going to building a storage vendor, right? It's not leverage. And at our stage, it's actually we're multiplying, leveraging our current or our previous efforts. Because the people that are using StorPool are relying on StorPool with the mortgage of their house and the college of their kids. Like, we cannot, let them fail. And that's why StorPool is so high quality product. There are many things, and engineering, sleepless nights, a lot of efforts. It's just something that you cannot do with a traditional model, which all other storage startups are usually built on, which is kind of VC funding and 12-month development cycles. And if it works. If it doesn't work, well, we need to raise another round somehow. So we'd rather kind of put a lot of makeup on a pig and kind of. So it's a very different route to get to where we are.